I would like to welcome you all and start our meeting tonight. This is the Salina City Planning Commission. So we'll begin today with approval of our minutes from last meeting. Have you all read them? Hello?
So approved.
Okay, we've got a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
I feel like I'm an auctioneer. Excellent. It's been moved and seconded to approve our minutes from last meeting. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Motion approved. Thank you. That brings us to new business this evening. We have several public hearing items. The first item is number 3.1, or application CU 19-3. This is filed by Chief Brad Nelson for the City of Salina Police Department. The request is for a conditional use permit for an indoor shooting range in a P7 district. This property is addressed as 3770 Yost Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are familiar with the Yost Edition. It is located at the southwest quadrant of the Waterwell Road I-135 interchange. And as we indicated, when the new interchange went out in this vicinity for Waterwell Road, KDOT required the City of Salina to relocate a number of utilities out of the interchange, and that created an opportunity to get utilities west of the interchange. And there was interest on the part of KDOT to construct a maintenance facility at the south end of the property, and that was kind of the trigger for development of this area. All the platting and zoning was approved in 2002, but for a number of years the only thing out there was the KDOT facility. Then in 2013 we had construction of the old Dominion truck terminal, and those are the only two developments in this area. The property in question is zoned planned C7, and the reason for the C7 designation is at the time it was anticipated that its proximity to the interstate interchange, that it would be a suitable location for businesses that served travelers on the interstate. That has not come about at this time, but it's still likely that that's what we're going to see in that area. So back a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, May 2015, you met and considered an application for a conditional use permit to allow a police department training facility at this same location on Yost Drive. And Chief Nelson enjoyed himself so much we decided to invite him back to do it again.
I thought it was deja vu.
So at that May 15th hearing, you did vote 7-0 to approve a conditional use permit and final site development plan for the proposed shooting range, subject to a number of conditions. After your approval, that project was put on hold while the City Commission explored the possibility of locating it in an alternative location on West Old Highway 40. The City Commission ultimately decided not to pursue acquisition of that property on West Old Highway 40, and interest has returned to this site. However, as noted in condition number 11, the need to apply for a building permit or extension within 6 months did not occur, and so the permit approved in 2018 has expired, necessitating the filing of this new application. So you are familiar with the old police department firing range on West Old Highway 40, which is what used to be the city's animal shelter. It's not a prime location. There are a number of deficiencies with the building and the site. And in 2017, the capital improvement program, including funding for design of a new training facility with an indoor shooting range. And our current capital improvement program includes funding for construction of a new police department shooting range. So this property has frontage along Waterwell Road and along I-135. As we noted, the C7 is a designation that's designed to support interstate or highway-oriented uses, and the permitted uses include governmental buildings, but they are in the conditional use category, so this is coming to you as a request for a conditional approval of a conditional use. The plan that's been submitted for your review has a 15,800 square foot fully enclosed training facility, has 10 and 25 yard handgun lanes, a 50-seat classroom, garage, SWAT locker room, a simulator room, and miscellaneous office, storage, and break areas. There are no changes proposed from the plans that were submitted with the 2018 application. So your role is the same as it was, to first determine whether the requested use would be compatible with the surrounding area, and then whether the building design and site plan layout is compatible with adjacent properties. And we have reviewed this for compliance with zoning ordinance requirements. All of the setbacks, lot coverage, all of those things are met. As far as the welfare and convenience of the public, we have indicated the technical and operational needs of the department. It's your job to look at this and determine whether the proposed conditional use will contribute to the welfare and convenience of the public in this location. The applicant, being the police department, notes that this will provide enhanced training and gun safety opportunities for law enforcement personnel. There's a possibility down the road there may be other groups that may benefit, but right now it is primarily designed and intended for the Salina Police Department. Certainly the existing facility is outmoded and unsuitable for the police department's current needs. And this is adjacent to a KDOT facility and a trucking facility, so it's not an area where we need to be concerned about environmental or other concerns. The injury to surrounding property, the primary impact, as we've discussed with shooting ranges, is noise. And there are various methods available to control and reduce the noise produced by gunfire. There's things that can be done with walls, overhead baffles, safety ceilings, and with floors that can abate the noise. And so there are some soundproofing measures that also can be taken to the building. From an environmental standpoint, the main environmental concern is the potential for lead contamination from the ammunition used. And most shooting ranges, including this one, are equipped with bullet traps that contain and collect the fired rounds. And we have provided information and elevations about the building facade. We don't think what's proposed would be out of place with what is the surrounding area. The building would be L-shaped and contain 15,000 square feet. The Old Dominion facility across the street has 7,000 square feet, and the building will be stepped back from the property line. It will be a predominantly flat roof with a building height of 22 feet with precast concrete panels and metal coping caps. The question for you is whether you believe that this location would cause substantial injury to the value of other property. And the Kathleen Bradley Trust that currently owns this property recognizes that there might be a need or desire in the future for some of the land to the north that might have restaurants or hotels or other types of uses, and they are not concerned that this will have any detrimental impact on that in the future. We pointed out that the Yost addition was developed with what we call cost recovery fees, meaning that the improvements were put in first, costs were calculated, and then those are recovered over time. Essentially, the City of Salina would be paying itself for those services. We have looked at the access and parking to the site, and the parking provided is adequate to meet the needs of the proposed facility. So the future land use map was amended to show the Yost addition as an employment land use area instead of a commercial area. And since the governmental buildings and indoor shooting ranges are allowed within the C7 district, there are no further amendments to the plan that are needed to accommodate this use. We've summarized some possible findings to support this location. This property's remained vacant as zoned for 15 years. It's a second tier, not a primary interchange location. It's adjacent to I-3 zone property, which would be the KDOT maintenance facility. And if adequate sound containment measures are implemented and the facility is buffered, it should not impact any of the adjoining properties. We have needed public utilities and a paved street in place, and we are in a transition area between South 9th Commercial Corridor and the airport area, and we think the proximity to the interstate highway and the airport flight path help mitigate any concern about noise at this location. So your options would be to approve this as submitted, approve it with specified conditions, or any revisions you think need to be made to the plan. You could postpone consideration if you have unanswered questions, or you could deny the application if you think this would be incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Staff's recommendation would be to approve this application, including the use, the site plan, and the design plans for the building. And then we've identified a number of conditions there that are very specific to an indoor shooting range, and we think that the applicant's architect is familiar with and will address at the time that a building permit is submitted. So with that, we're open to any questions you have about the site, anything about how the facility would be used or operated. I think we would defer to Chief Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff first? The 10 recommendations, those are the same 10 recommendations that were on the application
They are the
last time?
same recommendations, and some of those, when we, the Planning Commission worked with staff to create a text amendment that added indoor shooting ranges as a listed use. These are some of the things that the commission expressed that they wanted to see addressed when individual applications for shooting ranges came in. And so we have based those on the guidance we'd previously received from the commission.
That's what I was wondering. I don't know, some of you were here for that discussion, and those things obviously manifested in these recommendations. Questions? If not, would the applicant like to speak? Again?
Brad Nelson, Chief of Police.
Thank you.
It is the same as last. I would say the firm that's actually designed this, they've built upwards of 100 of these facilities. Not necessarily every one of them had a range, but they certainly are experts at building ranges. They're certainly cognizant of the fact of sound. You know, sound is huge. They'll go by everything that's said as far as the sound goes, but their goal at each facility, they tell me, is the sound at the outermost area of the property line will be that equal. It'll be no greater than the AC unit, which is on top of the building. So they really concentrate on keeping the sound down, because sound shuts down buildings. I mean, it'll shut down. I've been in places where ranges have been in place for decades, and then somebody moves within the sound level, and they're able to shut the range down, which I don't know if I understand, but that's a little bit different. But no, everything's to be done to keep the sound down. The hours of operation, we certainly have no problem with the 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. You know, that's not an issue, and I think that's fair as far as the operation. So I just ask that you approve it, but if you have any questions of it, I will certainly try to answer any question you have.
One moment, then. Do you have questions?
I have, yeah. Is that okay?
Certainly, go ahead.
I am concerned about the noise. We live just across the river, and from that area. And sound carries phenomenally there. We can hear things that you'd be surprised we know exist. So I'm wondering what the criteria were for how loud that sound is.
Well, I can tell you that the sound, as told me by the architect from Kansas City, the sound will be equal to, at its greatest level, as to a noisy restaurant, is how they compare it to, specifically 68 decibels. I mean, I don't know if that means anything to you, I don't know if it means anything to me, but the sound of a noisy restaurant tells me something. But the building is completely enclosed. There's absolutely no gunfire outside the building. And everything inside the building is designed to keep the sound inside.
Right.
Well, and to absorb.
Yeah.
You don't want it all kept inside as far as your own hearing goes, but everything is designed, the roof, the side panels, everything
Yeah.
is to
Yeah.
absorb sound.
I noticed you used hours of operation as your criteria, but it's not at night that it's so problematic. It's when you're trying to enjoy outdoors during the day.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a point of reference, normal speech is about 62 to 64 decibels, if that helps you. with
Yeah,
the-
it does.
Has a relative point of reference.
Yeah, yeah.
We're learning a lot tonight.
And truly, when I said sound's the number one issue, the other I guess it'd be the number two issue, is rounds getting out of the building. It's nothing's impossible, I guess, in the world, folks, but it's highly, highly improbable. I can show you what's called a bullet catcher. All it is it's steel plates where you shoot towards the steel plates, and everything's funneled into this area here, right here, and drops down into a auger, which goes out into a barrel. But I mean, if anything is virtually impossible, that's about as close as it can be to actually escape the range itself.
Yeah.
I don't know how that could possibly happen. There's not windows. I mean, there's nothing
Right,
for it to
right.
go out.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah.
So, as part of this, staff has done a lot of research and have copies of, there are a lot of federal shooting ranges that have been established for various federal agencies. So the Environmental Protection Agency and OSHA have set standards for indoor ventilation, outdoor emissions, indoor sound levels, and outside noise standards, as well as lead containment. So if you see condition number 2 there, requires the building and method operation to conform to those standards, so the architect knows that's what they need to design to. Then the other thing I would point out is condition number 8, and that is Planning Commission reserves the right to review or modify the performance standards for the range. So if after the range is open and it's been operating for several years and the commission doesn't believe that those standards have been lived up to as far as outside noise or other items, number 8 reserves the right for you to say that you want to revisit that issue and to review how it's actually performing. So I think the combination of those two things should address that concern, because it allows you the chance to revisit this, because we really don't know how it's going to perform till it's actually up and in operation.
Are there other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else that has a question, would like to speak, has a comment, concern, thought? If not, we'll close the public hearing on this item and bring it back to the commission for discussion or a motion. I'm sorry, Linda.
No, I'll go ahead and do it if we're ready.
We're ready.
Okay. I move that we approve application CU 19-3, including the proposed use and the proposed site development plan and design plans for the proposed new building, subject to the following conditions of approval plus any additional conditions. And that's 1 through 12. Those conditions.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application CU 19-3, along with the 12 staff recommendations. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
So for the benefit of Chief Nelson and for the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission is the final decision maker on conditional use permits unless there is an appeal or protest filed within 14 days. So essentially, this approval upon 14-day waiting period will become final action, and you will have a conditional use permit at that time.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. That brings us to item number 3.2, which is application CU 19-4, filed by Jones Gilliam Architects on behalf of the Salina Police Department, requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow construction of a secure accessory parking lot for the Salina Police Department. This is in an R3 neighborhood or district, and the subject is on North 10th Street, 301, 303, and 309 North 10th Street.
Thank you. John, if we can start with the zoomed out map, we'll get the context of where we're located and talk a little bit about the history. So the blue highlighted lots here on the screen are the subject property that we're going to be discussing. And those properties are part of the Bishop Addition, which was platted in 1870 and has historically been residential dwellings. If we can go to the zoomed in map now, John. So starting in 2016, the police department started acquiring, scroll down a little bit more, started acquiring these residential properties. So you can see 309 was acquired in December of 2017, 303 was acquired November of 2016, and 301 was acquired in July of 16. So these three properties here are the subject of the proposed off-street parking lot that we're going to be discussing. If we can go to the PDD of the Enforcement Center, John. So the property just to the south where the Saline County Law Enforcement Center is located, they have a campus that incorporates the Salina Police Station, the Sheriff's Office, as well as the county jail. And in 1963, the former Old Brick Jail was removed and a new building was constructed in 1967. And in 1993, this campus expansion took place. And this is what we call the Saline County Law Enforcement Center, PDD. And during this particular project, 11th Street was closed and a new jail that consisted of 175 beds and over 53,000 square feet was added. So you have the police station on the north, you have the county law enforcement to the south of that, and then you have the jail. Now, as part of that development, the building official at the time estimated that 60 to 80 additional off-street parking spaces should be required for the police department and municipal court properties. However, limited off-street parking was added at that time. In 2001, the final development plan for the campus was amended, and we can go to that, John, just scroll down a little bit. I think it's the same document. And that addition added the municipal court, as well as 20 off-street parking stalls just to the south of that. So, in a nutshell, what we're dealing with is a campus that has been expanding and growing, and off-street parking has not been keeping up with those expansions. And that's part of the nature of why we're here today, is the police department is looking to construct, let's go to the site plan, John, construct a parking lot, and that parking lot would house 23 parking stalls that are 11 feet wide, 19 feet deep, and the objective of having this parking lot is to have a secured off-street parking situation for the police vehicles so that they are protected from vandalism and they're secured from being messed with or theft, because they do have firearms inside of those vehicles that they use for emergency purposes. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different elements that are part of this parking lot. I guess we'll start with the fencing and the securing apparatus of this property. If we go to the fencing, John. So the applicants are proposing a 6-foot steel ornamental fence, and that is designed to provide some screening, but not a lot, because we want to ensure that there's proper visibility inside of the parking area, so to make sure that we don't see any delinquent activity taking place. And it also is of a steel structure so that it is secure and difficult to break into. In addition to the fence, there will also be a motorized gate that will be activated through remotes that the police vehicles will have, similar to your garage door opener. So when a police vehicle is either entering or exiting, they can activate the gate, open it, enter or exit the gate. So the entire site will be completely surrounded and secured with this fence. When we look at the ordinance of the R3 district, which is the zoning of the 3 properties we're looking at, this is a conditional use permit and requires review and approval by you. And so in looking at those different requirements, we see that the proposed parking lot meets all of the different zoning elements that are required, with the exception of some landscaping. And those landscaping elements, which we'll get into more detail later, are 1, the required square footage, and then 2, the buffering and screening, particularly along 10th Street and along the west property line. The surfacing of the parking lot is going to be paved with concrete, which is sufficient and meets the requirements. The minimum widths for a parking stall are 8.5 feet by 19 feet deep, and the police department and the applicant, Jones Gilliam Renz, are proposing an 11-foot wide stall. The reason for the wider stalls is because police officers a lot of times have a lot of attachments and tools around their belts, and they want to make sure they have enough room to get in and out easily into their vehicles without scratching and dinging up the cars next to them. And the aisle widths for one-way driving aisles, they're required to have a 12-foot wide driving aisle, and they're proposing 12 foot 3 inches, so they are a little bit larger, a little bit wider than what is required. For ADA parking, the police campus already has adequate off-street parking for ADA requirements, meeting the ADA requirements. They have 4 off-street parking spaces, and this particular parking lot, since it is a private parking lot meant for vehicle storage and not for public parking, and because it's across Elm Street, which is fairly well traveled during the day, adding ADA parking stalls to this parking lot didn't make sense and is unnecessary, considering we have sufficient ADA parking on campus currently. Driveways, there is a single 24-foot two-way driving aisle off of Elm, and so the idea is that when police vehicles come in, they can come in and circle all the way around, and when it's time to exit, they can just continue out that same gate that they'll have to open and shut the enclosed area. The location, this is a satellite parking lot. It is on the north side of Elm Street, across from the police station. However, the code does allow for satellite off-site parking in the event that that off-street parking is within 600 feet of the property that's serving. And in this case, the distance from the police station to the parking lot is 70 feet, so we're well within that 600-foot distance. Buffering and screening, those are the 2 next topics, and that's really the areas that are probably the most unique in this instance, where they're not meeting the strict application of the zoning regulations. The property is adjacent to residential. This is actually to the east. So this is north, this is west, and this is south. Or excuse me, this is north. I'm even getting turned around. No, this is south. This is south. Okay, so they're supposed to have a 5-foot landscaping buffer and screening along all 4 sides, because they're adjacent to residential to the north and residential And to the west, which would require 5-foot buffers. They have it on the north, they don't on the west. In addition to screening from residential properties, they need to have screening from street frontages, which they have 2 of those. They have 10th Street on the east, and they have Elm Street on the south. They have landscaping on the south side that exceeds 5 feet, but they don't have any along 10th Street. And so what the applicant is proposing to do is use some of the right-of-way to add some shrubs to knock down light spill if cars are pulling in here at night, or if cars are driving by, we don't have that light spill and light intensity that it's affecting the area and the neighborhood. So what they're doing, the applicant, is they're requesting that the zoning administrator allow for alleviation from the strict application of those landscaping requirements. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So when we're talking about trees and shrubs, they do have a number of trees. They're hard to make out here on the overhead, but you do have those in your packet you can look at. But there's 3 shade trees along Elm. There's another one kind of tucked back. Thank you, John, that does help. Tucked back along the northeast corner of the property. And then they do have a number of shrubs, 9 or 15 here, and then 9 here along the north. So there are a number of shrubs and trees that are being used to landscape the property. For lighting, they are proposing a shoebox style downcast LED lighting, which is what we require. And we require that to make sure that the light spill is minimal and we're not negatively impacting the surrounding residential properties. You're still probably going to have some light glow off of the surface, but you won't have any light shining into the windows of the adjacent residential properties with this style of design. So when we look at the zoning administrator's authority to allow deviations from the strict application, anytime we have a redevelopment project like this, these landscape regulations allow the zoning administrator in instances where we have site boundary issues or extraordinary topography to allow deviations from that strict application. And in this case, the zoning administrator has determined that the limited depth of the lot, we can go back to the landscape plan, John. The limited depth of the lot, which is the east-west dimension, and I'll point it out. So the limited depth, the east-west dimension here, isn't sufficient for the parking lot to have meet the dimensional requirements in terms of the stall depth and the driving aisle depth, and still have buffering and screening along both the east and west edges of the property line. That would create a unique hardship that makes compliance with the strict application of landscape regulations unreasonable. He also determined that the need to secure the police vehicles while preserving visibility to deter vandalism and theft within the vehicles is a higher priority than the landscape regulations. And he also determined that what is being proposed by the applicant in terms of the landscaping on the south, the north, and along the east does meet the intent of the landscape regulations, even though it does require portions of the right-of-way to be used to meet that intent. And the fence, while not fully screened, is an attractive fence that is of an ornamental nature. When we look at the welfare and convenience of the public, the applicant states that allowing the construction of the proposed off-street parking in this location could contribute to the welfare of the public by decreasing the amount of congestion and on-street parking that we have, particularly along Elm Street, which is a problem today. And staff would agree that reducing congestion around the law enforcement center campus, it would be a positive for the neighborhood, as it is fairly significant. Looking at the injury to the surrounding property and domination of the neighborhood, the presence of the police station campus has been at this location since the early 60s, so it's not new. It's well established in the neighborhood. And with the exception of the senior center to the east, all of the surrounding properties around the law enforcement campus are all residential. meaning that any expansion to the law enforcement center would be an encroachment into an established residential area. And so staff believes that with the appropriate buffering and screening and landscaping and controlling the light spill, that the proposed parking lot at the edge of the neighborhood could be compatible with the surrounding uses and not cause any injury to the neighboring properties. When looking at the public utilities, the only utilities needed for the proposed use is electrical power for both the parking lot lighting and the powered gate, and that service is already provided in an adequate fashion for this property, so no additional utilities will be needed. Looking at traffic access, the property has a 24-foot driving aisle off of Elm Street that is sufficient for two-way traffic and would provide 23 off-street parking spaces for police vehicles, which currently are typically parked in Elm Street. So we are reducing the amount of traffic and access to the site. Neither 10th Street or Elm Street are collector or arterial streets. Elm Street's probably the more highly traveled, as it is a through street and is the primary street that employees and visitors of the law enforcement campus typically use. The campus currently has 75 existing off-street parking spaces, so with the added 23, that would be specifically for the use of securing the police vehicles, there would be 98 total off-street parking spaces associated with the law enforcement campus. And just to reiterate some of the parking deficiencies that we've had historically on the site, in 1977, a parking study was conducted by a local architect, and at that time, it was determined that the campus was 102 spaces short of what they should be required to have. And since that time, multiple additions have been added with very few additions in off-street parking being provided. So we are significantly short of what the needs of the law enforcement center are. Looking at the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, this area is designated as an urban residential area, which is primarily designed for dense residential properties as the primary use, but as secondary uses, the comprehensive plan does recommend civic and institutional type uses, which this would certainly fall into that category. And there are locational criteria and development criteria. And for the location criteria, the satellite parking lot would qualify as a civic development on the edge of an established neighborhood focal point, with the focal point being the existing law enforcement campus. And for development criteria, the proposed plan meets all of the access requirements, open space requirements in terms of having landscaping primarily focused on the main thoroughfare through the area, which is Elm, which is where we do have the primary portion or the bulk of our landscaping that's being proposed. And the design of the facility is designed to complement the existing character of their surrounding uses and the law enforcement campus. So we do have a number of suggested findings for you at the bottom of page 15 that you can look through. And at this point, the Planning Commission has the option to approve the conditional use, to allow the accessory satellite as being proposed, with any conditions that you may feel necessary. You could approve the application subject to any specific revisions if there's something that staff has overlooked that you feel is necessary for this facility. You could postpone consideration if you need more information, or you can deny the application if you feel it would be injurious to the neighborhood or is incompatible with the surrounding area. Staff's recommendation, if the Planning Commission wishes to approve the conditional use permit, we do have a number of conditions that we would recommend. There's actually 8 of them in all at the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17, and we can discuss any of those if you would like. And with that, we'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there questions for staff? This is a 24-hour place, right?
Correct.
It's not just a night thing. I mean, they're not just going to move the vehicles over there at night.
Right, it's when they're not in use. I'll let the applicant or the chief talk about, what he expects as far as how often vehicles are going to be located here, but they are when they're not in use and not in the field.
But you addressed congestion because that's really the issue here. That street that doesn't work with a whole line of police vehicles all day. It's really difficult to drive down it, and it's really not neighborhood oriented to begin with. Yeah,
Because really the issue here is.
it's like a
this is
car lot.
Off-street parking, but it's really almost viewed as off-street storage.
Mhm.
Because when police vehicles are parked in Elm Street, they're not really parked, they're just being stored there because they're not in use. It's not because somebody's visiting or working at that center needs that vehicle for transportation, it's because that vehicle is not in use.
Well, this is more like containment, which is something I think we advocate and we talk a lot about in the commission, that cars and vehicles should be segregated to a place rather than spread out amongst in front of everything. Are there other questions for staff? No? The applicants, did you want to address this?
I'll just say real quick, I like to learn something every day, and today I learned about light spill and light glow. I never heard.
We've done a lot of that talking. You should come more often.
I never heard the term
Yeah,
light
no,
spill.
you should
That's
come a
interesting.
lot. We discussed that.
I think one of the questions, I think you've hit it on the head, that the need for this is just to get our cars off the streets and to secure them in a secure parking lot. I was pretty surprised when I came here, besides the range, the condition, also the fact we do not have off-street parking, secure parking for our police vehicles. Because it's about if they're all there, it's over $500,000 of assets that's just sitting there, and people don't, when they're not on the streets. But you also have to realize that we have a number of cars, they're not driven 24/7. It's usually 3 officers per car is how you figure out how many cars you need. You can't drive a car 24/7. So if anybody wonders why we have that many cars, it's because you can't drive them 24/7. But as far as the equipment that's in there, it's been probably a decade and a half where actually the magic number was surpassed, where the monetary amount of the equipment within the car and on the car, mounted to the car, actually costs more than a car. I mean, we're talking computers, there's so many things in there, weapons, that need to be secure much better than sitting on the streets. That's pretty much the sole purpose for getting them off the streets and traffic congestion. But getting them off the streets, freeing up spots for personally owned civilian vehicles to park, but primarily just to get them off the streets and to secure them better than they have been for the past century, probably. We're almost to a century now as far as being a police department, but we've never had a secure parking lot per se, so that's why we're seeking it today.
Thank you. Mr. Gillum?
Yeah, Jeff Gillum with Jones Gillum Renz Architects. One thing I wanted to point out, I think Dustin did a great job, that one of the things when we met with Dean and Dustin, the whole issue here really is the conditional use for the buffer, the landscaping stuff. The right-of-way along 10th Street is really large. And I think that's what helped us all think of, we have a large right-of-way that's not being used. So, does it really hurt to gain a little bit of that 10-foot and create our landscaping and buffer? So that sort of helped it, I think, for all of us, is that I believe it's an 80-foot right-of-way. And 10th Street, as you know, is just a small residential street. So there's plenty of room there from the curb to the sidewalk. Any other questions?
Questions for Mr. Gillum?
I guess I do have a question. Instead of having the parking across the street on Elm Street, why not put it on the west edge of the current law enforcement center on the southwest corner? What is that below the parking?
And I don't know that I can answer that. That probably has to do with more the master planning of
Yeah.
the police department.
Why
and
not put the
jail.
parking there?
Well, that's not convenient for for black and white to be parking there as far as getting into the building, because our actual door, the way we enter, can you show, everything is entered there, everything's parked there, and everybody enters there. I mean, every officer enters through that door. It really, to me, I'm not saying we never even consider over there. For one thing, it's the sheriff's department's land. It's their land. It's not our part where we can put something there, I guess, unless we ask. But as far as convenience to where we actually park and where we exit and enter the building, that made the most sense.
Yeah, to expand, so this area is really viewed as potential jail expansion, since this is the jail. And so if you put a parking lot there, it could hinder those possibilities in the future for that action.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Gillum. This is a public hearing again, so is there anyone else that would like to speak or ask questions? If not, I'll close the public hearing and we'll bring it up here for discussion. Commissioners? A motion? Questions? Is there something we need to discuss?
We do have the staff recommendations on the bottom of page 16, if that's helpful, or if there's any conditions there that you'd like to discuss, we can certainly do that as well, or review.
I'd like, would you tell me again what the answer was to the question about the other location?
The other location is reserved for jail expansion.
Oh.
And the police department is actually on the north side on Elm Street, across diagonally from the property.
Yeah.
So they
Right.
actually enter and access the building directly across from this property. And this has been an ongoing project for some time to acquire these 3 lots for this purpose.
I'd have to go back and look at the exact arrangement, but I believe that the Saline County Law Enforcement Center property is owned by Saline County and that the city has a lease agreement with them whereby we have the police department and the municipal court. Those are the only 2 city operations there. Everything else there is under the control of Saline County.
If this helps as far as, this is where our cars park, and roughly here, where we all enter the building. So to park everything over here, to include our police cars, really doesn't make a lot of sense. The other issue is we forbid our employees from parking up here. That's for our customers, the citizens who have business to come inside. So we don't allow them to park here. We can basically only park, anybody wants to park is here at the end of the door. That's why we have so much of an issue on Elm Street as far as parking goes. I don't know if that helped, but I was trying to say, as far as where we enter and exit, everybody is just here. See on the door we enter and exit.
So this plan has, that's a convenient issue, but the other thing is that the space is available then still for expansion of the jail. I should think our society is trying to shrink the amount of incarceration, not expand it. Obviously, you can't help that at the moment, but
No, and that wouldn't be what the numbers reflect. It's growing.
Well, part of the reason that we provided this commission with a lot of the background information about the construction of the Saline County Jail is that's the expansion of that jail is the #1 issue that the county commission is wrestling
Yeah.
with now because of overcrowding in the current jail. And so that issue's not, it's going to come to the front burner pretty soon. So we just wanted the commission to be aware of the history of how the law enforcement center campus developed. But that was identified as a possible expansion area for the jail to move out towards 12th Street there. So that was never viewed as open space. It was viewed as potential expansion area for the jail. It went from 62 beds to 175. And they're concerned that it's overcrowded.
Thank you.
Well, I move that we apply, or approve application CU 19-4 with staff recommendations on page 16 and 17.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application CU 19-4 with the 8 staff recommendations as listed. All those in favor vote aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
1 against, all the rest in favor. The motion carries. This brings us to our third item, item 3.3, which is application SUP 19-1. This is filed by Des Vadi requesting approval of a special use permit for an open-air market in a parking lot in a PDD C3 shopping center district. This is at the Central Mall, which is addressed as 2259 South 9th Street.
Thank you. This particular application is a special use permit which requires the Planning Commission to review and approve. And a special use permit in this case is similar to a temporary use permit, however, it has a longer longevity to it. And a temporary use permit, we could issue that administratively for up to 14 days in a 6-month period. But the applicant in this case is proposing a roadside stand that would operate from May all the way through November at the Central Mall. And it would be a single roadside stand, and he would be selling eggs, frozen beef, pork, lamb, chicken, and as well as seasonal produce produced from his farm. The location is shown here on the overhead, and it's near Chili's restaurant and the Urgent Care Clinic, if you're familiar with those locations. So he is kind of at the opening or in the throat of the main entrance coming into the Central Mall, and there is a landscape buffer or island that kind of surrounds his area. John, if we could zoom in on that a little bit, we'll get a better look at that. So you can see that there's a couple of trees and there's curbing on the north, on the west, and also on the south. And the idea is to park perpendicular or parallel to the curb, parallel to the island, perpendicular with the parking stalls that are currently there. So the proposed roadside stand would operate as a Tuesday market from 4 to 7 from May through November. And the applicant has been operating similar roadside stands around the region at roadside stands as well as farmers markets for more than 25 years. And he has a, thank you, John, for zooming in, a custom trailer that he's built that is designed to provide comfortable shopping for his customers, where he has separate bins for his different produce, and it allows him to have umbrellas for shading and allows for easy, visible, eye-level type of viewing for the customer, something that you would have at a shopping mart. So looking at the sanitation and utilities, the Central Mall has agreed to provide restrooms or allow his employees, and any customers access to the restroom facilities as part of his lease with them. And the applicant has taken safety training for how to properly handle produce, and he will be employing those skills that he learned from that training. And the applicant also has a freezer that can be operated from an inverter connected to the truck vehicle when it's in movement, or from a generator that he has that's a standalone generator for when he's parked and not running the truck. For security, he or himself will always be present at the stand, and if there is an incident that arises that where they need help or emergency assistance, they will call 911. For noise control, the applicant does not have any amplified sound that is being proposed, and the generator that he does have is fairly quiet, he states. Looking at the parking, there are a number of off-street parking stalls in the general vicinity. You do the zoomed in version, John, that might help. One more, please. There are a number of off-street parking spaces around the area. He is located along the west end of the parking lot, so he is quite a ways from the main entrance of the mall. So these stalls are rarely, if ever, used, and they are surplus parking. So he will park his truck with his trailer, again, in this red area, outside of any driving aisles, and would have ample off-street parking spaces in close proximity for his customers to use. For fire safety and emergency medical emergencies, the applicant states that he does have the privilege of being close to the urgent care clinic if an incident arises where somebody needs emergency medical care. If it's beyond that, then he could call 911. For cleanup, he will have trash cans on site and plans to pick up anything that his patrons fail to discard in his trash can before he leaves, and leave the site in good, clean condition when he leaves. So in looking and analyzing the totality of the application, the applicant has been running various food stands and roadside stands and farmers markets for over 25 years. The location that he has is very visible while still being protected by a landscaping buffer on the northwest and south, and has some shading with a couple of trees. The roadside stand has sufficient off-street parking nearby and will be outside of any traffic aisle, because the traffic aisle that is in the area is just directly to the east of where his stand would be. So the required findings of fact that the board would have to make are that the dates and hours of operation that are being proposed are adequate for the site, and that the noise generated by the site or the roadside stand would be acceptable, and that the site has adequate utilities for the needs of the proposed roadside stand, and that the operations of the applicant propose sufficient removal of trash and litter, and that there's sufficient off-street parking for both the applicant, his employees, and any customers that he may have. If the Planning Commission finds that the open-air market roadside stand is compatible with the surrounding property, staff would recommend the following conditions of approval. One, that the open-air market shall be limited to the area shown in the red hashing. So this red box, basically, it'd have to be completely contained within that area, and that the site be cleaned and restored to its original condition at the end of every event, every roadside stand event that he has on Tuesdays, and that the special use permit may be revoked if the applicant is ever found to be in violation of city codes or any conditions that you put on the special use permit. This special use permit would be on Tuesdays from May through November during the 2019 calendar year. After that, it could be renewed administratively as long as the applicant continues to meet any conditions of approval that you would put on him. If a decision of denial is voted on, then any decision to deny the special use permit would potentially be appealed by the Board of City Commissioners. So those are kind of your options. You could approve it with any conditions. You could postpone it if additional information is needed, or you could deny it if you feel it isn't a good type of use for this property or would have negative impacts on the surrounding area.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Are there questions for staff?
I do have a question. So what happens if the neighboring, the MedExpress, not MedExpress, but the urgent care facility in Chili's, based on the generator saying it is quiet, generator changes, we start getting complaints of noise from that? How's that handled?
Well, you could have a special condition that any generator be of a reasonable sound, and then in that instance, if we were getting a lot of complaints, we could say you need to get a new generator or find a way to reduce the sound, and that's something that could be addressed through a condition of approval of the special use permit.
Okay.
We'll ask the applicant about it also, but I frequented this site. I didn't even know you had a generator, actually. So, any other questions? No? Would you like to speak? Your name and address, please.
Yeah, I'm Dave Swatty, and I live at 1056 Highway 111, Canopolis, Kansas. And this is a family operation. My son and I run this, and we run a market on Saturday at Ellsworth, and he has a trailer for that, and I take this trailer to Hayes. And we were trying to find a midweek market that we could go to. And we were involved in the North 9th market for 3 years, and then that one closed down. And so we were trying to figure out a way to be able to sell our stuff, because we have a lot of customers in Salina that we'd like to be able to address. And currently, if I have an extension cord, I plug it in and I don't run a generator. Or if a generator isn't available, I'll run my pickup about every 30 minutes for 5 minutes to keep it. So I don't think the noise will be an issue. But they sell a Honda generator that the people at Hayes Market, they have they sell cheesecake, and she keeps everything cool, and I don't even know it's running. So I don't think it'll be an issue. But I really appreciate the opportunity to try to present this, and I appreciate Dustin to help me do it. Thank you.
Why did you choose this location?
Well, on North 9th, it was at the Methodist Church in the parking lot, and the accessibility wasn't very good. But we went to the mall, and they thought that it would be a great idea, and I think that accessibility is going to be better there.
Mm-hmm. So at the 9th Street Market up north, you were plugged in via
Yes.
electricity there?
There was no generator running.
And was it this one or the other one that you were using, the cart?
Well, I'll use the cart here,
Yeah,
too.
yeah. What about when it was at the school down at, in the south end?
At Schilling?
At Schilling. Which cart
I-
was that?
Yeah, the same one.
Yeah. There was no electricity?
No, he ran the pickup to keep it generated. But the trouble with it is when it gets to be about 100 degrees outside, if you're pulling juice off your battery on your truck, you're gonna knock your alternator out, and that gets expensive.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Questions? No?
I
Thank you.
guess I do have one more question. So the area that you've got marked off, what happens if somebody's parked there? Are they going to have that blocked off during those days and the times before you arrive? Because if the conditional use is only for that area and somebody's parked in that
Well,
area?
I have never seen anybody park in there, and I guess it is true, but I guess, I can move. That area is big enough for probably 2 trailers, so I think I'll have room. I don't foresee it being an issue, because most people aren't going to walk that far to go to the mall.
Our understanding from the agreement that he has with the mall is that he's leasing this area, which means the area should be preserved for him.
Okay.
And, it could be a matter of asking them to relocate their parked vehicle, but that would be an option.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Mr. Cooper? Nope. Good. We'll bring it back up here then. Any discussion? Any more questions for staff? How many do we have now out for farmers markets, conditional use permits? We've had a roll of them over the last 5 years.
Some of them have not lasted more than a season. So we had one at Grand Avenue Methodist Church. There's one that was north of Dairy Queen on North 9th Street. There was one that moved from the Masonic Center to Grand Avenue Methodist Church. And then we also have a farmer's market inside the Salina Fieldhouse. That's an inside farmer's market. And there's one on Crawford and Front Street. So it's almost, it seems like they're all on different days of the week. And so they don't necessarily compete. The first one was in front of Waters True Value, the Saturday
Isn't that
farmer's
still
market.
going?
That was the
It is,
first,
yes.
first one.
Yes, and they all tend to be central to north. There aren't any in the south.
Most of them are north
No,
of Crawford.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I go to all of them, as you all know. So, and sings at one. So yeah, they're all in the north. So I would think this would be great for our highest traffic count in Salina.
I have a motion.
Certainly.
Okay, I move that we approve the special use permit application 19-1, following the 3 conditions on page 7.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application SUP 19-1 with the 3 staff recommendations as listed. All those in favor, vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Story had the second on that motion, correct?
Yes, he did. That would bring us to our last public hearing item, which is application PDD-11-3B, which is also filed by Jones Gillum Renz on behalf of USD 305. This is requesting approval of a final development plan for Phase 3 of the USD 305 Operations Center, PDD. A new storage building south of the maintenance building along Broadway, and this property is described as Lot 1, Block 1 of the Hegman Addition, and is bounded by Hegman on the west, Cloud in the north, and Broadway on the south.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not a rectangular property because Broadway runs at an angle, and we have already looked at the Saline County Law Enforcement Center, PDD. This is the Hegeman Operations Center, PDD, and the idea behind this was to create a campus for USD 305 to consolidate their support operations for the school district. And this was formerly the site of the Tally Ho Manufactured Home Park. And in 2010, USD 305 purchased all of the Cronenberger family's remaining land holdings, and they combined those together with the Hegeman School site and created an 18-acre campus as described, bounded by Cloud on the north, Hegeman on the west, and Broadway along the south. And this was done as a planned development district. And a planned development district is a tool that we use to try to create a customized zoning district for things that might not fit our standard zoning classifications. And so it allows us to customize things such as uses, lot size, height, setbacks, those types of things, as well as to condition approval of any zoning change. And it also makes the site plan part of the zoning application, so that allows you as a commission to address concerns about how many buildings, the types of buildings, access points, surfacing, site drainage, landscaping, those types of things. Staff sometimes refers to planned development districts as what you see is what you get zoning, because the expectation is that what gets presented to you is what actually gets developed in the field. So what John has on the screen was the very original campus plan that the school district submitted, or their architects submitted, and the pink area was considered to be phase 1. The green area was considered to be phases 2 and 3, and the area to the southeast along Broadway has not got a color code because that was undetermined, unknown at that time. And so in their initial application, the school district requested approval of this overall development plan for phases 1, 2, and 3. And then they had a final plan for a warehouse maintenance facility, which was phase 1. and that was a 43,000 square foot building that's located right here. And so that plan was approved at that time as part of the original zoning application. We've summarized the conditions that you put on this plan development district. The list of the uses that are limited to are on page 3 of your report, as well as some of the other requirements. One thing that was done at the time is the school district requested 2 exceptions. One of them was to have a more traditional xeriscaping landscape plan, and that was due to overhead wires and some other things. So their landscape plan along Broadway contains no trees. It is primarily ornamental grasses and non-water consumptive shrubs, as well as buffalo grass. And so they wish to continue that as part of this application. The other thing that was requested was a waiver of the paving requirement for portions of their off-street parking. The Planning Commission was supportive of that at the time, but the City Commission was not. And so the City Commission required that all on-site parking, driving, and maneuvering areas be paved with asphalt or concrete. In 2011, when the plat for this property was approved, the Planning Commission, City Commission did approve an access point, access drive here on Broadway, but because of the median, that is a right-in and right-out only driveway. And so it's staff's understanding that traffic that's turning left is turning left down by the video store and migrating back through the old mobile home park, which is not proved to be ideal for their access. In 2012, the school district came back with their final plan for Phase 2, and that was for an alternative school in the northeast corner. And the Planning Commission approved plans for that in 2012, and that's this facility right here in this corner. As you can see, at that time, they still didn't have any plans for this area. And so this is coming back to you, and it's coming back to you as a public hearing item because the plans for the school district for their phasing, they have been increasing the floor area. Their original plan for the campus had about 96,000 square feet of buildings. And if the alternative school addition and the proposed addition here are built, then we'd be up to about 155,000 square feet. And so that, it's not that they can't amend their plan, it's just that that amendment requires a public hearing. So this is a public hearing on their change, which is to construct a 12,000 square foot warehouse southeast of the maintenance facility on the area that was identified as undeveloped on their preliminary plan. And they are also proposing as part of this project what we'll call a median break in the median out along Broadway to allow for left turning movements. The application indicates that the building will substantially conform and be compatible with the existing buildings as to design, exterior materials, setback, and landscaping. So we've kind of provided a summary of everything that's on the campus. So you have the former Hageman School, you have the operations building, you have a small storage building, you have the alternative school, and then this is a warehouse building that's being proposed with a possible future addition. And so this is a substantial modification of their original plan, but they're still within the lot coverage and other parameters in this planned development district. So what they're planning is to orient this building so it's going to be a smaller twin to the warehouse building, and the maintenance building to the south that would match the setback at 25 feet from Broadway Boulevard. It's our understanding this is for internal operations, so this parking area here would be gated and would not be general access. There would be a secured parking there behind the building. It would have a painted metal skin with block and brick fascia, would be similar in color and appearance to the maintenance facility. It'd have a similar sidewall height and overall height. We've taken a campus approach to parking, and parking has not been an issue. There is adequate parking on the site, even a slight surplus overall. And so this project would have 175 feet of developed frontage along Broadway, and school district is requesting a variation from the landscaping regulations consistent with what they did with Phase 1, and that would include low-growing shrubs and ornamental grasses, but few, if any, shade trees because of the overhead wires. And since this is a PDD, you do have the discretion to approve a customized plan for the site if you think it still meets the spirit and intent of the landscaping regulations. As far as site drainage, there is an L-shaped detention pond that is south and west of Genesis. That pond was sized for ultimate build-out of the campus, so it's designed to accommodate runoff from this site. The property drains, or the pond drains through a pipeline over to 9th Street that goes by Suburban Appliance and Genesis Health Club. So your role this afternoon is to look at the site plan, the landscape plan, and the building elevations. Staff has reviewed those and determined that they do comply with their city's ordinances, regulations, and policies, except for the deviation that's being requested for landscaping. And so you're being asked to transmit to the applicant your findings as to whether this complies with parking signage and landscaping regulations of the city and the development standards of the PDD. So our recommendation would be to approve this plan amendment for Phase 3 that would allow the 12,000 square foot building with the proposed addition. The proposed landscaping plan, the proposed building elevations for Phase 3, and that you approve the access break in the Broadway Boulevard median, subject to the following conditions. One of them would be that the final design plan for the median break be approved by the city engineer before any work is done to remove the median. That development of the site conform with the plans presented this afternoon, and that a building permit be obtained within 18 months of today's meeting. If you could go back to the plan, John, and I don't know, do you have the slide on the options for the Broadway curb cut? If not, we do have in your packet, we summarized 4 different design options for the median opening. If you could go back to a site plan, John, where we could see the median opening. So this is the median. It's presently closed. I don't know if you have an aerial photo, John. That might be the easiest thing to look at. But the concern that planning engineering staff have is primarily with left turn movements southbound on Broadway because of the speed of vehicles traveling on Broadway and the fact that there is no driveway openings essentially between Cloud and 9th Street, that having a left turn in without a decel lane would be something that would not be a safe movement. So one of the things that staff has been discussing is if there is a break in the median there that would allow for left turns, that there should be a space where vehicles could decelerate out of the left lane and then make the turn. That is one option. Another option would be to only allow left turns out. And that would be, come up with a design, something similar to what we have at Popeyes and what is done on Quick Shop on West Crawford, where you design the curb where it only allows for a movement out and not able to make left turns in. Of course, another option is to allow all movements with no improvements, and a fourth option would be for the Planning Commission to deny the request for a median break altogether and leave it as a right-in, right-out plan. So with that, I would be open to any questions about the plan for the site and any other questions you have about the requested median break. But as I said, right now it is right turn, right out and right in only, and there's no left turns coming for southbound Broadway or to come out of the facility to make a left turn onto Broadway. So with that, I'd be open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. I have a question, but I think I'll direct it to Mr. Harris because we've had these conversations. But in xeriscaping, if you're going to use trees, I don't ever see shade trees in xeriscaping, but if you were going to use some kind of tree, what would be the suggested tree that we'd use on a boulevard frontage or something like that?
Well, we do have a number of trees on our xeriscape list, and those trees are primarily trees that are native to the area or do well with our climate and soil types and don't require a tremendous amount of water. So we do have a number of trees on our list. There's a number of maples, there's a number of oaks. There are, I'm trying to think of other varieties that we typically see off the top of my head, but do you have any, Dean?
Locust?
There are
Yeah,
some
locust trees are
There
usually
are
pretty
some
good.
newer
Service
varieties
berries.
that have come out that are out at the ComCare facility on South Ohio. They're not, trees and xeriscaping are not mutually exclusive. It's just that with the concept of xeriscaping, shade trees do tend to have deeper roots and need to consume more water. But the this plan that they're showing along here is relatively consistent with the plan. If you've driven by the existing building, it has shrubs and landscape beds out in front. There are just no shade trees out along Broadway in that location, and they're proposing a continuation of that pattern.
Thank you.
Did you mention that there are overhead lines that are part of the problem?
There are overhead lines, and that was a consideration in 2011 when the Planning Commission looked at it at that time, and the representatives of the school district pointed out the potential for conflicts between taller trees and power lines, and we do. Planning Commission has made that adjustment before in some other cases along South 9th where we have rib crib and some uses there that the Planning Commission has allowed shorter ornamental trees to substitute for shade trees because we do want to, it doesn't do any good to plant a tree to then have it removed because it conflicts with a power line. So we try to avoid it if possible.
Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Charles Renz with Jones Gillum Renz Architects, and I'm here representing Chris Epson with the school district. I think the description that they gave is very good. It explains what's being done. A couple of things that I would like to point out. Just the nature of the overall design. The intent has always been to make the buildings nicer than typical storage buildings. So we have. In the past out there with all the new facilities that we've done, we've been with the school district, we've been on a budget, but we've incorporated a lot of the colored split face block, the brick, those types of things. And I think that, I think you'd agree, it's a nice looking facility down Broadway there. Some of the other things that we've talked about just earlier tonight, some of the light spill issues, those types of things. There is some lighting on the building. It will be lighting that's consistent with the existing building that's there. It's really just accent lighting located at the pilasters, those spaces. I believe that he's showing there is a rendering that was done several years ago prior to the actual design of that, of the current operations center. But you can see the materials have remained consistent out there. Regarding the landscaping, going back to 2011, I believe that was 2011, time flies, when that was done, we did have concerns with the power lines. We had concerns with the xeriscaping and those things out there. We were trying to go that direction. The right-of-way area, as I recall, was also that is a drainage area. And so there is some ditch and in that area out there. So we were trying to avoid shade trees and things that would be not only conflicting with the overhead power lines, but with the ditch. And they have gone to a lot of effort to try to make the building nice with the landscaping and also keeping that landscaping maintained over the years. I think one thing that you see pretty commonly with xeriscaping around town is it starts out as nice xeriscaping and it turns into buffalo grass, I guess. Buffalo grass everywhere. The school district does make every effort to keep that looking nice and keep their facilities looking good. Regarding the turning lane that we are requesting, if you could go back to the site plan, one thing, we looked at the ability for left turn in. So if you're down on the north side of Broadway, but where you had that existing median break on the down in the lower left corner there, that's turning into a neighborhood right now. And so there's quite a bit of traffic turning into there, and you can see the length of that deceleration lane. We didn't feel like in discussing with the owner that we don't really need that left turn in. The owner's fine, that is not a deal breaker for us, the left turn in. The main issue is the left turn out. And this building is replacing another facility that they have on site or in town that's going through an ownership transfer. So they're looking at getting out of that building. But as far as the use of that's primarily for UPS deliveries on a daily basis. About 3 to 4 times a week, they might have a larger vehicle of semi-trucks and those types of things. So the major storage component of this building is cold storage. There will be a portion that is heated storage, but it is really temporary storage for things like the school district's furniture, things that maybe computers that are coming out waiting to be recycled, that type of thing. So the in and out, we don't with large vehicles, we don't expect that to be, a real, impactive use of the site. I think it's, but it is very difficult for the 3 to 4 times a week when they do have that larger vehicle to meander back down through the site, through the roundabout, all the way down to Cloud Street, and then going down, Cloud Street is fairly tight, and you get to that intersection there. It's kind of an oddly configured intersection as well. So I think this will be a big improvement for this facility.
Thank you, sir. Are there questions? Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming. Anyone else have questions or wish to speak? No? Then we'll bring it back up for discussion.
We just felt like having them work out the final design with the city engineer was the best approach unless the commission feels strongly that they shouldn't be allowed to cut the median at all. So,
Commissioners, do you have thoughts on that or questions regarding the curb cut, median?
Well, I think the biggest issue is the left turn in, because it's such a long, I ride a motorcycle down that, you drive a car down there, and the problem is it's a long stretch. People don't pay attention. You watch everybody on their phone, heads down, and if you have a left turn in, somebody's going to be slowing down and stopped, and if you're slowing down to somebody, you're going to get rear-ended.
And I'll just address that. That's what I was trying to say, is you can see the length of the deceleration lane on the east side of the street right there. We felt like the only way we were going to achieve that deceleration lane was to take away some of that existing deceleration lane, and we didn't want to do that. So the left turn in, we're willing to work that configuration around so that we don't need the left turn in. It's the left turn out that we're concerned with.
So what we would do is look at a design that had kind of a opening that was at 45 degrees or curved or whatever, so it was virtually impossible to turn in, but design it so that it funneled cars out but didn't allow cars in. And we think we can work with them on a design that carries that out. If the commission wants to make that part of their motion, that you support left turn out but not left turn in, then you can make that as part of your motion.
I'd like to move that we approve the amended final development plan for Phase 3 of the USD 305 Operations PDD, including the proposed 12,000 square feet warehouse building addition, the proposed landscaping plan, the proposed building elevations for the Phase 3 storage facility, and the access break in the Broadway Boulevard median for a left turn out, not a left turn in, subject to the 3 conditions on page 11.
Second.
Who was the second?
Wally.
Commissioner Story. Thank you, Commissioner Story. And Commissioner Eisenhower. Okay, then we'll vote on this. We have the motion and a second. All those in favor, vote aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Then that motion carries also. Thank you, sir. Have a good
That
evening.
is final action on that, Charles, so there's this doesn't go to city commission, so this, yep.
That stretch if you had a left.
Have a good evening. And that would leave us with one item, 3.5, which is a legislative matter, application Z 19-5, requesting amendment of section 42-503I of the Salina sign regulations to clarify what types of fines are and not allowed in public right-of-way. This is continued from April 2nd, 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a public hearing item, but it's legislative, not quasi-judicial. It also deals with signs, which means that we're dealing with the First Amendment and not just regular zoning authority. And as we pointed out, as a staff, we've been working with things such as fabric banner signs on power poles and street light poles. There's a desire for that. There's a desire to be able to place signage on bus stop benches and shelters, and those are in the right-of-way. We have, on occasion, the City Commission has authorized signs in the right-of-way through license agreement. There's not really any authorizing language for that, but it has been done. We have exceptions in the downtown area that allow, if you think of the Stiefel Theater, there's a large projecting sign that projects out from that building over the sidewalk. Well, that sign projects into the public right-of-way, and there's a special exception for that. And then we also allow businesses to place sandwich board signs or movable signs on the public sidewalk downtown. And so we forwarded this information, the concepts that staff was working on, to our legal counsel, and they identified 5 and 6 that we already have as exceptions as permissible content neutral exceptions. But their concern was that the other ones we were attempting to allow under the exception for government speech, and when you have government speech, the government can regulate its own speech, but it has to be clearly established that it is the government speaking. And so the city attorney believes that we have a separate section that deals with exemptions for governmental signs like traffic, pedestrian-type signs, and he believes that we need a firm definition of what constitutes a government sign. And so to do that, we need to expand beyond the application that we've already advertised. So our recommendation would be to authorize staff to amend the application that we've filed on your behalf for section 42503, expand that to section 42504, and also to create a adopted definition for what constitutes a government sign. So to do that, we would need to amend the application that we have currently filed with your authorization. So our recommendation would be that you as a commission authorize staff to amend this existing application to expand its scope, and then we will continue to work with the city attorney to have something that is a definition of a government sign that we can all agree with, and to get that adopted into our code.
Thank you. Are there questions about signs for Mr. Andrew? No?
I move we,
Let's hear from our public who are anxiously waiting to
there.
talk about this
Then
subject.
I see.
Yes. No, I don't think there are, so now you're free.
all right.
We'll proceed.
I move that we follow the suggestion of Mr. Dean.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we, what are we actually doing? Authorizing
Yeah.
staff to amend this application. All those in favor vote aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And that would bring us to administrative items, of which we have none.
We do have none.
Preliminary discussion items.
We do
which-
have some preliminary discussion items for you. Mr. Hers, myself, and Ms. Driscoll all attended the APA National Conference in San Francisco, and Ms. Driscoll's not prepared, so she'll just wing it, but we are going to give you each of us a 2-minute overview or 3-minute overview of the sessions we attended and what things we learned to bring back to you, and I'm going to let Mr. Hers start, since he's more prepared.
Yeah. So, our conference was in San Francisco, and that means that there was a large West Coast contingency there. It means a lot of the topics of discussion were very relevant to the things they have going on there, which are things like...
I guess your mic went up.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Which
you.
are things such as parking, on-street parking and off-street parking, things such as ADUs, which is what we've talked about some here. It has a little bit different flavor there because ADUs are viewed as part of a solution to the housing crisis that they have because of their land values and how quickly they've jumped in the last 10 years. It's $180,000 house 10 years ago is about $1.5 million now. So it's pretty dramatic, and a lot of that's due to the explosion of the tech industry, where they have highly skilled employees involved in the tech industry moving out there and acquiring property, and the demand and the supply have really put themselves in a situation where real estate is very expensive. So there's a lot of housing crisis, and there's also a shift in retail development that they see, even in San Francisco, where you have some very prominent retailers that are struggling, and they're struggling because of the way that retail is changing. A lot of times, people of a younger generation, and even in older generations now, are using the internet to purchase the things that they need and they want, because they can do it from a computer and they don't have to get out and hassle themselves with that. And so in order to attract people to their site of business in our brick and mortar setting, a lot of retailers are adding experience type venues associated with their retail. And we're even seeing that with banks, of all things. So we walked by, and that would be Lauren, Dean, and I, were walking, I think it was around Chinatown, and there's a Chase Bank, and it had a cafe and a coffee shop inside of it. And evidently that's not unusual on the West Coast for banks to start doing that kind of thing. So retail is really changing and shifting to more experience-oriented elements and activities that attract people there. So you're not just going to purchase something, but you're going to have an experience. And that's how they get you away from your computer to do your shopping, I guess. San Francisco has now passed New York as the most expensive place to develop. And in California on the whole, it takes at least 4 years, if not 6 or 7, to have a new development. So if somebody comes in, they have an idea for a new development, it takes a really, really long time to get approved, and that's a number of reasons. They have a lot more bureaucracy than we do, and they also have a lot of sub-area plans. So every location on the map has a sub-area plan, which we have some of those, but we don't have a lot of those here. And so what that means is there's neighborhoods that are completely planned out before a developer even comes forward with the idea of how we're going to develop it, which always creates a lot of conflict because a lot of times the developer's idea and the sub-area plan, which took 2-3 years of it in its own, studying, they don't always match. And so then it's how do we amend the sub-area plan to fit the developer's needs, and it just creates a really long timeline for development, and we're very thankful that we don't have to deal with that here. ADUs are used as a way to address some of the housing crisis there, and they actually encourage them, and there are cities that require that all new development are residential development, all those houses and those dwellings are designed with areas within the initial footprint where an ADU could be added later. So what that means is there may be a covered area that is covered by roof, but maybe isn't enclosed and doesn't have the utility aspects or the bedroom aspects or the bathroom aspects and the kitchen aspects that you would have in an accessory dwelling, but it has all of those elements available. Or it could be a rec room or family area or living room that is designed as an extra space that has plumbing and everything already available so that it can be converted to an ADU should the need arise. And to address off-street parking, what they do is they require that on-street parking require a permit. So you have to get a permit to park on-street. And so if you want to have an ADU and you can't add any off-street parking on your site, you could purchase an on-street parking spot, but it's going to cost you. So that's one of the things that they do there that's a little bit different than what we typically see here. And I think I've used my 3 minutes, so.
I also attended sessions on accessory dwelling units, but there was a tie-in between accessory dwelling units, and I attended 3 different well-attended sessions on the issues associated with short-term rentals of dwellings, and those ranged from taking housing out of the permanent housing stock and making it short-term. In one case, there were some residents of a community, more rural community in California, and some of the residents thought that their community had been taken over by aliens because the number of people had moved out of their community and just turned their housing over to short-term rentals. The other thing that I learned is that they all said that don't even think about trying to adopt a ordinance to deal with that if you don't have a good concept of how you're going to enforce it. because the city of San Francisco hired 6 full-time code enforcement officers to deal with short-term rentals and short-term rental enforcement. And those 6 officers in 12 months were able to generate 25 cases between the 6 of them, because almost all of the short-term rentals are impossible to detect or enforce. And so the other thing is that the various platforms that help operate those do not cooperate in any way, shape, or form with any local jurisdiction to make their life easier. So in other words, voluntary compliance is not an option. But many of the accessory dwelling unit ordinances that are adopted specifically prohibit the creation of accessory dwelling units for short-term rentals, because that kind of defeats the purpose of expanding housing opportunities if you're housing transient guests and not persons. The other session that Dustin and I attended was one that dealt with all the challenges of managing your public rights-of-way, from talking about small cell deployment on power poles and poles in the right-of-way, signs in the right-of-way, and also with panhandling and soliciting in the public right-of-way. And they're all interrelated with the public right-of-way being viewed as a place for public forum and public speech. The third item, or one that I attended that I guess I didn't really grasp that, but the number of people in the United States who golf has declined fairly rapidly since 2000, and that the number of golf courses that have gone under and closed nationwide is fairly high. And so there was a session talking about what do communities do with golf courses that abruptly close. And there was discussion about how to turn them into public parks and issues associated with that. But the other thing that was interesting is they said that 63% of the people who watch on golf on TV are over the age of 55. So it doesn't look real promising for a growth in that area. But I was somewhat surprised at the number of that there was a real big golf building boom around the year 2000, and then many of those golf courses and some established ones have failed, and then local communities are looking at options for repurposing golf courses, which consume a lot of space. And so those were the 3 main things that I focused on, was accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals and accessory dwelling units, and then loss of golf courses.
Thank you. Ms. Driscoll?
I can't believe Dean can't think I can fill 2 minutes of interesting facts, because it was an amazing conference. So I think just to give you guys just a couple minutes is just barely the tip of the iceberg, because there was a lot of interesting things going on. I went to a fascinating session on how to address autism and folks on the autism spectrum and design guidelines. And it was quite an aha moment for me when they started looking at numbers. And as the department that handles a lot of ADA compliance, the number of things that we have set up to address physical disabilities within building construction and design guidelines, but we have many more people who fall into the autism spectrum, and how we're not recognizing how we could design things differently for those individuals, and what a significant part of our population that could be. Fascinating research coming out of Ohio State University is where that originated. So some really interesting concepts that you don't have to rewrite your code or things like that, but as you move forward, how you could build that in to your community, looking at how you sign things, everything from public transit to park layout was very interesting to address that. Also went on a really interesting mobile workshop looking at how The Berkeley, San Francisco area is using land trust to provide affordable housing. A lot of different ways. They're much more mature in using that tool than us. There are several land trusts or community land trusts in that greater San Francisco Bay Area. They've come together, they have a consortium in which they share best practices. But it was interesting to see the different types of housing and also mixed-use commercial that they were preserving in traditionally diverse neighborhoods. Also went to a session on understanding anti-Blackness. I think it's important just to kind of, this is a very evolving world. APA is taking some pretty strong stances on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my mantra has always been to remain open-minded and learn and kind of understand those folks coming from different places. And it was really interesting to hear from their historically Black community the challenges that they're facing. As Dustin was pointing out, income and equality has been threatening traditional neighborhoods and where people are going and how they're dealing with that. So gentrification comes in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and you don't have to have Silicon Valley to have that happen, and what that looks like. So very, very interesting. And we got some great education on diversity, equity, and inclusion. APA adopted a full strategy for how that's going to be implemented in our organization, and a policy guide that's used for legislators all over the country as they work in their communities and look at best practices. So a lot of interesting things happened at the conference.
Thank you very much. It was so nice that you guys got to attend.
And we did create our own walking tour as we had dinner at Fisherman's Wharf, and then for some reason decided we could walk
Yeah, I
from
did that
there
once
to
too,
downtown.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we did walk from Fisherman's Wharf through Little Italy, through Chinatown to downtown, so we got our own self-guided walking tour.
I spent a lot of time looking for a cab halfway through. Anything else?
We will be meeting on May 21st, and I think the item that will be of most interest to you is that there is a proposal to make the land that is directly west of, behind the Comfort Inn and Suites that's currently being built on Coach Light Lane, to make that developable. It is in the floodway for Mulberry Creek, and it is currently zoned agricultural, as it used to be a homestead there, but there will be applications coming before you at your meeting on the 21st proposing that for development. So if you want to get familiar with that site, you have to get off of 9th Street onto Coach Light Lane and go back and look at that.
Thank you. And the Salina Community Relations Division has invited the commission to attend the 2019 Salina Housing Summit, which will be held June 28th from 9 to 1 at St. John's Missionary Baptist Church. There will be coverage of current housing resources, current community housing threats, and opportunities to improve housing. Lunch is provided. You must RSVP to Gilda in the Community Relations Division.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would like to just expand on that a little. I think ideally the chair is invited or the chair's alternative, just because of quorum. There's no official decision-making there. If more of you would like to go, we need to tell Gilda, and then we need to advertise that more of you are going to be in one place. Really, the objective of this summit is we have a lot of people kind of playing in the sandbox that is housing. It's a very complicated and very broad subject, everything from rental to building, but also from prisoner reentry to homelessness to veterans affairs. And there's only so much money and so many resources. And I think part of this exercise and this communication is to get everybody on the same page, know what's out there, and then also to figure out where we can maybe best place resources.
Thank you. I have told her that I will attend, but the deadline for this is the 28th of this month, which was the last Tuesday. So if there's someone else that wants to attend or a second, let me know, and we'll figure it out.
It's
so
just that if more than
Gilda
a quorum of
knows.
you attend, we would have to advertise that, just that a majority of you would be meeting in a place and that no city business will be discussed. So we just would need to know ahead of time if a majority of you would be attending.
Thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to let you know, too, that on the 15th of May, we're going to be having our 4th Downtown Arts and Entertainment Ordinance meeting. There's a large stakeholder group that meets for that, roughly 38 people. It is open to the public, and it is advertised in the paper. Things are really moving along, and staff's been reading a lot of other ordinances lately, and that was one of the cool things about San Francisco is we got to talk and go through some sessions for other exciting downtowns and what folks are doing and learning about how they're permitting and licensing these kinds of things. But the purpose of this project really doesn't wrap up until December, but the stakeholder committee meetings go until September, are to tackle many of the different subjects that are going on downtown, from special event permitting to mobile vending to a variety of other things. And it is planned in that project that following the stakeholder group completing their draft, they will then put that out for public review, take in the public's comments, tweak their draft, and then it's going to go to a variety of different boards and commissions before it goes to the city commission. So, of course, Planning Commission, as parts of this, will entitle the zoning ordinance, but a couple of other boards and commissions affected by this as well. So if you're interested in that project as it's going, those are advertised, and there's a project page on the website.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
That's all until the 21st.
Then I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, vote aye. Aye. We're out of here. Back to the rain.